I am a ardent believer of visualization. And I truly believe that if you visualize 10 minutes a day and you visualize where you want to be, that becomes your destiny.
Welcome to the High Voltage Business Builders Podcast, a show where we interview high voltage entrepreneurs growing and scaling through e-commerce, real estate, and other wealth without Wall Street ventures, showing you the path to making your first or next million. Everybody, welcome back to the High Voltage Business Builders Podcast. It's Neil, and I was going to come up with a funny middle name, Neil something Twa, and it's like, well, nothing really rhymes with Twa. That's kind of tough, and nothing rhymes with Neil that's cool, unless you're like Neil the Squeal, and that doesn't sound very good. It makes me sound like I'm running away from the mafia. So today, I'm going to talk to you about business. We're going to talk about growth. We're going to talk about tenacity, I'm sure, and experience in life and mindset, and of course, opportunity. And the guest that I'm bringing on today, I believe, will extol all of those things. So I'm honored to have him here on the show. Thanks for joining me, Jeremy.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Neil. I appreciate it. And I think maybe something like Neil the Moon might work out. You don't steal the Armstrong thing, but
Oh, Neil,
moon,
that's so fun. I was
with
trying to put that one
crypto and
together. I'm
everything
like,
today, everybody's talking about flying to the moon, and it seems like you've gotten pretty close to doing some of those things. So
yeah, how about Neil Armstrong Twa? There you go.
it's not even the moon, man. I might start just calling you the moon, Neil the Moon
The
Schwab.
moon. Shoot the moon. That's not a bad thing always. All right. Sounds a little dangerous at times. Shoot the moon. So where are you coming in from today?
I'm in Denver, Colorado. I was
Excellent.
born and raised here, fourth generation. So I've got 4-year-old twins, and so they're fifth generation. I always tell people I'm, fourth generation. I'm not 400 years old, but
That's a lot of generations of Colorado. They must have been some of the first settlers into that area.
yeah, when my grandpa died, I found this memoir and was reading it to him right before he died about 4 years ago. And it was my great great grandparents owned a convenience store in Iowa and moved out here in the late 1890s.
No kidding.
And the story from that jumps out at me is they'd never seen the mountains, right? And so when the train stopped in Castle Rock, they were going to Pueblo, where my grandfather was mining bauxite, which was big back in those days. And apparently they got off the train in Castle Rock, and the mountains are 20 miles
Wow.
away, but they're so big that they were 15-minute stop, and they were going to run. They were just going to run over and touch the mountains, but
There's no way you can do that from
yeah, they
Castle
didn't
Rock.
realize.
Yeah. And I know where that train station is. We used to mountain bike just beyond. There's a little hilltop mountain spot where you can get on a trail right down from there. I used to live in Castle Rock for a while, which was a lot of fun. And I know that train station, and I never realized, I guess I didn't put two and two together, how long that actually been there. I know the story of Castle Rock is funny because it was literally put on the map because there was a bar or a watering hole, if you will, between Denver and Colorado Springs. And it got known for people riding their horses into the bar. You ever heard that story there?
Yeah, Parker, Colorado is another one that a lot
Yeah.
of these towns on the Eastern Plains originated. My parents live in Parker, and now they call it a suitcase town. Now it's actually turning into just another suburb of Denver. But when I was
It
a kid,
is.
we'd
Yeah.
drive out
It
there
was
in the
that
middle
way
of
like
nowhere.
15 something years ago when we were there. It was just building and growth and condos. And it's about it's about 6,800 feet up. I mean, it's pretty high, 6,500 feet up.
Yeah,
So it's not usually, I mean, there's a lot of outdoor activities you can do, of course, when you get acclimated to the weather. So I was flying in and then out of Denver Airport, and we're like, hey, let's go somewhere that's not in the city, but hanging out sort of in the country. And that's why we ended up in Castle Rock. But then I had to fly up to Denver International, out of Denver International. And so every time I'd leave, I'd go to one of these low plains. I'd go out to Minnesota, or I'd end up over in New York. And then I'd come back to Colorado, and it was like, I'd spent the first day or two reacclimating to the level of the climate, which is fascinating. But you
yeah,
obviously didn't.
it really is wild. When I go to the East Coast on a vacation, that's when I get my 10-mile jogs in, because it's like I'm on drugs. And it's
You're on
funny because,
oxygen drugs.
living at this altitude, you have a lot more red blood cells. And so when you go
Right.
to a sea level area, it really is like blood
Mhm.
doping, illegal blood doping, I guess. And you can,
Well, that's why they have the big Olympic training there up in the Rockies. They have
yeah,
a
the
big
in Colorado
facility up
Springs,
there.
yeah.
Yep, where they train at the high altitudes because it helps out. And I've ridden the back of that up to Pikes Peak, and I know that that's a challenge. Like I think I didn't ride the last little ways. I walked it because it was it was humping it up there at 12,000 plus feet up.
Oh man,
But
yeah,
it was
those are those 14ers we've got. How many now? 54 14ers or so. These 14,000-foot peaks. I've climbed a few of them, and man,
blast.
those are a bear calf for sure. But it's kind of a bucket list item if you're going to be here.
So is it true that because you're in Colorado, you're an adventurist, and
You know,
you are?
so it's an interesting idea. Talk a lot. So Maroon Bell Outdoor is my company, right? I launched it 7 years ago as a sort of a grassroots startup, but I don't have a background in fashion. I got my degree in accounting. I spent 7 years working across the street from the White House. I was in New York. My brothers and I had a land development company for a period of time. I have a twin brother and a brother that's 1 year older than me. So we were like triplets growing up. And one of my foundational slogans for this company is the idea that you don't have to be on top of a mountain to find the outdoors. You just have to go outside. And when I
Like
started talking about the company, I kind of told people, I'm like, well, being from Colorado, we were outside all the time. And I think the image people have in their minds is that we were running around the mountains and skiing and all these things. But most of us, like most of us in the country, grew up, even though we were in Colorado, we grew up in the suburbs. And
yeah.
so we grew up on the sand lot playing baseball. And my God, we used to crawl around in sewer or the water ditches when we were in middle school because we thought it was adventurous, But we spent our lives outside. We
Yeah.
just loved being outside. And I don't know
Yep.
if it's the idea that, our parents and generations of people come to Colorado because they're attracted to the outdoors, but that
It's also
was
our generation, right? Because I grew up in Oregon, and that was, the whole thing about just being thrown outside until your mom kicked you out and said, "Don't come home until it's dark." And then it was like, what was the meme I saw the other day? It was like, everybody survived except for the one kid that ended up on the, kid list. What was the name of that show back in the day with the guy?
oh, unsolved mysteries.
Unsolved Mysteries, like the weakest link that ended up on all Unsolved Mysteries. And it was kind of like your childhood in a nutshell. It's like you'd be kicked outside and go do something. Don't come back until later.
We used to,
Um,
yeah, we had a hill behind our house with a big hill and then a little hill and a chain link fence with a metal post. And we used to dump water on that thing the night before big storms. And then we would jump on our bellies and try to jump through that gate. And my mom
yeah.
at one point was like, you guys have got to just wear helmets or something. She's like, people think I'm abusing you because my three boys, their faces are all beat up all winter.
You look like you're
And
being beaten.
yeah, and she was like, I got to
Nobody
explain
questioned
something.
that back then because we had to do things outdoors. We didn't have the same level of technology. I mean, we're going to reminisce for a second, but we didn't have things to go keep us indoors.
Right,
We didn't have tablets. We didn't have cell phones.
right.
There weren't computers at that level, not till much later. And the television was usually black and white, and sometimes color. Not everybody had a VHS. I mean, this is the time. It's
Yep,
strange, but that
yep.
is the experience. And so it was like, well, go do
We didn't,
something.
yeah, like
Play.
we
We
didn't
came
have
up with all
cable.
kinds of dumb ways to hurt ourselves to have
Like
fun.
we didn't have cable until I was a junior in high school. And
Right.
yeah, like cable TV, like
Yeah.
at the house, but we had a black and white TV. I remember the rabbit ears, and I'm 40 years old. I was born in '82, and I think I mentioned this to you when we first talked, but and you were probably in the same boat. Dealing with some of the native users with Instagram and YouTube and things like that is interesting because they see it in such a different way than I do.
Yes.
I spent half my life with a black and white TV, and then the other half with a piece of obsidian in my pocket, talking to a satellite, telling me I took a wrong turn, and I'm like,
It's an interesting conundrum to see
yeah.
both of those sides of it, isn't it? I almost think at times it's as crazy as some of our grandparent things as they watch the car show up, and the horses go away. And then in my wife's great grandma's time frame, because she was 94, I think, when she died, she saw air travel come online. Like
Oh my
there was
gosh.
none of that. There was horses, then there was cars, and she saw airplanes in her lifetime. I mean, that's a very strange thing that's so common to us now. And
And we even take for granted internet, right? Like the idea that, like, so my dad, born in 1952, ran a few banks. I mean, an enormously intelligent guy. And like 10 years ago, we were laughing, and I'm not obviously not a native user to any of this stuff, right? And it was like 10 years ago, we were at their house, and I think my brother, who's an attorney, was like, I need to check my email. And my dad goes, and sorry, Dad, if you're listening to this, I'm going to throw you under the bus here. But he goes, you're going to check your email on on my internet, like on my computer? How does that work?
how does that work, right?
I have those moments all the time with folks,
Yeah.
with folks talking about stuff, and I'm like, oh, I don't say it out loud, but I'm like, you gotta have to have faith that this stuff exists in this
The
invisible world,
moment, yeah, there's realizations, and in 10 years ago, what you were doing and even what I was doing 10 years ago is dramatically different
Yep.
than even just the last 10 years. I don't know if everybody appreciates the significant growth and jump in growth we've seen in technology and advancements through things that, AI was around a long time ago. Everybody seems to think it just got invented, which I think is kind of funny. We were working at AI, 18, 20 years ago on a large scale, enterprise scale. So it's come
Wow.
quite a bit farther than what people actually understand. It's just the mass marketing has now reached a point where large language models have gotten out there. And of course, e-com and the business of e-com and internet online search engines and video and all this stuff is really advanced. to the place that, Maroon Bell and others can actually exist. They can show people the product. They can fall in love with a brand they've never seen a store for and never physically touched yet. And that, for me, is one of the fascinating things about these business models. What is your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I'm 7 years in and I started this company. One of my other slogans, our slogan now is we design products to become a character in the story of your life. But the idea is we make them to meet you where you are in your life. And we've adapted to that because when I started this, I wasn't married and I didn't have kids. And I lived in Colorado and I had disposable income. And I'm like, I love fashion. And I was like, I'm going to bring business acumen in other areas into fashion to do the most efficient way. So I vertically integrated the company. I've got manufacturer with a family in Pakistan that I've become really close with. But again, we get raw materials from the source. And when I started it, I developed the brand. It's just the logo is the Maroon Bell Mountain Range, looking at the lake in front of it. And what it sees back instead of its own reflection is the city of Denver, which could be any mountains, it could be any city, but the idea is the outdoors is a part of who we are. And then I started designing products that were high quality products with legacy materials that were groundbreaking, with the idea that, again, you don't have to throw them away every season. It's get away from fast fashion. But where I started the company was going to these festivals and markets in Colorado. These craft beer festivals are it's a phenomenon in Colorado, but there's one every weekend in every mountain town. And I created a 10 by 10 retail space and I would just drive up there and we would make, t-shirts, hats, my gloves, my flannels. I'd go up there with my phone and tell my story and explain and I'd shake 10,000 hands a weekend and make five, six, seven, $8,000 in cash. And that's how I ran the business for 3 years. Then I got married and I had kids and COVID hit. Yeah. And
A lot of change in a
yep, and I
short time
turned
frame.
38 and I turned 39 and I realized that I either evolve or I die because it'll
Mm,
kill me. These people don't understand those festivals. You go to a beer festival and someone's selling hats. You don't realize that they put 100 hours a weekend prior to that festival and then put a 19-hour day in each day of those festivals. They're killing themselves and it's in large part guerrilla marketing. But the truth is I had to evolve and it's been painful. It's been really painful to jump in and go all e-commerce. And we've had some great years and then we've had some really rough patches. And I think one of the most frustrating things that I've come across, I'm a enormously hard worker, but one of the most frustrating things that I've come across is there's very few barriers to entrance when you talk about consulting firms and marketing agencies and SEO firms and people that sell themselves to be experts. There's no regulation. There's no certification in large part. And you take a company like mine, and I'll be honest, I'll put my dunce cap on here, but I've been burned so many times by companies that I've had vetted that I had my attorneys, my brother, right, or interview. I've had multiple interviews, and you get 15 minutes in, and you're like, wow, I got fleeced, and you're
mm.
tied to this contract that you're like, all right, I'm out 10,000. That was a huge mistake. I'm out 20,000. I'm out 50,000. I'm out that, and over a period of time, a small company you get into a cash flow spot where it's a bad spot. Let's just put it that way. But I will say, and I know this is heading off into a little bit of a non sequitur, I am an ardent believer of visualization. And I truly believe that if you visualize 10 minutes a day and you visualize where you want to be, that becomes your destiny. And destiny is different than a dream because destiny means that that's where you're going. And there's been 4 times where on paper, Maroon Bell shouldn't have made it. And I have no idea how it did, but I refuse. I just flat refuse to quit. I ignore people. I ignore people that say sell it. They say shut it down. They say, I believe this company matters a lot. We cater to consumers. We cater to our clients. And I believe that it needs to be here. And
Yeah,
so anyway,
I agree.
sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there.
No, it's only relevant because you're talking about, action takers, imperfect action takers, go-getters. Sometimes we put ourselves out there and we get burned because we put a little too much trust out and then we don't quite understand everything that's happening. And so it doesn't work out to the way we think it would. But in actuality, those who actually have an overnight success story are typically the ones who have 15 years of grind, hard,
Yep.
push, tug, betrayals, challenges, sometimes bankruptcy, sometimes not. And all of that leads up to, hey, look, I'm actually making it now. It's actually successful. It's growing. It's becoming something. And everybody's like, wow, I want to do what you did yesterday. And it's like, well, no, you're going to have to look at the trail of tears that was left behind me, the jokingly 15 years to an overnight success. because it doesn't always happen for everyone in the shortest time frame we would expect or like it to
And
happen. But in
Neil,
action,
I think that's such a smart thing to say, and I'll piggyback on that. And I actually don't think it happens. I've never met somebody that it happened to where they just 4 months in blew up. I know it does happen, but it's really a lotto ticket, right? Most
it
of
is the
us,
one less than 1% of a
yeah,
lotto ticket, or you got struck by lightning twice in the same day. When in actuality, you persevered, you were tenacious, and you did something that others were not willing to do. You were willing to spend the time it took to do the work and live the way you're living now so that you could live like no one else when it does work. And that's
yeah,
the
yeah.
outcome that most people do want. They just have to get to that outcome. And a lot of times they don't always level set the need, time, expectation, energy, and attention that is required to actually do it correctly. You understand that. And your next steps, I think, are going to change because your destiny is going to change. It's just a matter of time, positioning, and location. The opportunity will be there. Luck is a part of business, but luck is just because you've had the opportunity to be in the right place at the right time because you were willing to step to some place someone else was not willing to go. And that's where opportunity and luck collide in business. And yeah, there is a bit of luck in business, and people
The-
cannot, you can't look at me and tell me there is not a bit of luck in business. But again, it comes down to you being able to walk in a position to take advantage of that opportunity when it does come to you. And then it looks like luck.
Yeah, and going back full circle to trains, I used to say, I wrote this years ago. I used to say, I always used to think opportunity was like trains coming to us. We got to be ready to like grab it when it comes by. But the older I get, the more I think that opportunity is like grains of sand on a beach that we're standing on. And that the more we clear up our own minds, and I'll attach this to the idea that over 7 years, I have been pushed in a corner a few times, a lot of times, and I've had to change myself. Just on a
Adapt.
personal basis, almost 2 years ago, I just said, I'm just going to completely stop drinking. I'm going to start working out every single day. I'm going to start doing lumosity every day to strengthen the elasticity in my brain. I'm going to start doing I never would have done those things if I wouldn't have started this company. I never would have done those things. Even up until like 2 weeks ago, I started working out at 6 a.m. because I'm like, all right, this isn't working. Like, what else can I control? And I think when we clear up our minds enough and we start controlling
Mm,
what we can control, there are a lot of
that's right.
uncontrollables. But when we control what we can control. I believe that those grains of sand start becoming clear to us. We get into it on another show, but last Friday morning, I woke up and I was in a very entrepreneurial, scared space. And so that's when I started working out in the morning. I'd been about 2 weeks in, and I had an epiphany. And then I got on a phone call a couple hours later, and a grain of sand sort of appeared. And I saw things in a different way, in a Freakonomics kind of way. And I looked at my company and I was able to get myself out of the fire, which I think is one of the most difficult parts of running a company, is getting out of the fire and saying, I don't like looking at things in a different way. And I don't know what I don't know. And I'll just make one quick mention of it. But one of those opportunities in grains of sand was, you and I spoke, and there was a company, that Voltage Media, that you're working with, that looks like there might be some opportunities to open up another sales channel. And I've been working with your team the last week or two. And again, like I said, we won't get too deep into it right now because we just started going. But again, I'm not surprised that happened, right? It is another grain of sand that became visible that I was standing on. It worked. And back to Steve Jobs when he gave the speech at Stanford
Mm,
about points, right? And I think it was called DOT. And how all these events in your life, and that's kind of like our products, the character and the story of your life.
yeah.
But we, a year ago, worked with a PR firm to have us written about in Forbes. We were written about in January. That article was subsequently taken down for, I have no idea why. I spoke with them. They got us a podcast on Entrepreneur Magazine, Action Ambition. And then that's how you heard about us. And so then we got in touch. And through that, over that period of time, I was in an entrepreneurial spot where I get pushed into a corner. And I, again, started working out in the morning. I cleared up my mind a little bit more, something I had never done. You and I got on an intro call, and this grain of sand that I had been sitting on becomes clear.
Yeah.
And since then, the tide has shifted again, right? And I'm excited, man. I love being an entrepreneur. The fear is nauseating sometimes. It's scary, but folks also don't understand how much power you have individually. You don't
That's right.
understand how powerful your mind is. When you think you're dead and you're done and it's over, it's not over. It is not.
Nope.
There is always a way out, no matter what.
You gotta get control of those emotions. I'd heard this video the other day, and it really spoke to me personally. And it said there is no such thing as emotions. There is only reactions to life's pains, problems, and history that you're simply bringing back up. If you can gain control of those instead of letting them control you, that's when you actually start winning the battle of your mind. And it was like, wow, that's really profound. That's actually pretty simple in its biggest right. I mean, it just spoke to me personally as a way to understand, we can live in those emotions, but in reality, they don't necessarily exist if we stop them. We
Yep.
can literally stop them if we
Yep.
choose to. We're not a victim of our circumstances unless we choose to be a victim of our circumstances. And if we choose to be that way, then scarcity is what we're going to get.
Yep.
If we choose to live in the abundance mindset and recognize that we can control those, we can overcome them, and we can direct them for good, then we start moving into abundance, and abundance will follow us. It will speak into the word or the world. It will speak into our life. It will attract like-minded individuals to you, and it will repel the wrong mindsets from you because they will not want to be around you when you literally don't resonate at the same frequency. And I think what happened for you is you literally started resonating at a different frequency. I feel it differently since the first time we talked. You're operating at a different frequency. And because of that, I'm going to see things from you that you probably haven't seen from yourself in years, and which is
Yep.
exciting to watch at the next step
I
of your
think you're
journey.
absolutely right. And to piggyback on that, I think victimization is suffocating, and I think it destroys everything. But I
Yeah.
tell people all the time, I read a lot of stuff about sort of like Buddhist mentality and just like clearing up your mind and staying calm. And the one area though that I've always had trouble with is the idea that we do have these feelings, right? Like being afraid of like losing everything is really, really a scary feeling. And they say that the chemical in your mind with financial stress is the same as dying.
Mm.
Scientists believe that that is the same chemical released in your brain of having a gun to your head when you have financial stress. So I say this to people, don't pretend like it's not there. What I try to do is sometimes it's when you're in that space, I'm like, all right, Jeremy, be a victim for a day. Feel it, be depressed, be sad, like be frustrated in this space. But
Go
then
to
I wake
sleep.
up at 5:45 the next morning.
Go to sleep.
Yep,
Sleep it
yep.
out.
That's it, man.
Take a new fresh hit in the morning.
That
Yeah,
I went to bed at
dude, what you're
9:30 that
explaining
night.
is entrepreneurialism.
I
You're
went to bed at
explaining
9:30. I
entrepreneurial.
got up and on that jog, I got goosebumps. I went numb and I'm like, let's change, man. We are not, nobody's taking this shit from us. Like we are not stopping. They can, and you just get that fight back. And so be a victim for
Yep.
one day. Give yourself 24 hours
Right.
and lay in a pile of fail, but then wake up and say, you know what? This is the life that I want for myself. I have been doing this for years. I've been visualizing it's my destiny. And I will not, because of an interest rate or because of sales, because of this, I will not fail. And listen, there is not a dumb human being on this planet. Human brains at their source are genius. They're smart. Every human being is like that. And just refuse to quit, refuse to fail. You will not fail if you don't let yourself fail. Sorry, you got me going here.
No, it's just letting you roll.
Yeah,
I
on
100%
my
agree with.
soapbox, man. I get so fired up
No,
about this because
no,
I've
the
been in this
fight
spot
is
so many
what's
times.
missing in a lot of people today. And the purpose behind the fight is what they're missing. They don't even know necessarily what to fight for in good or in terms. They're just going to fight everything.
Right.
And I think we see that a lot in our culture right now. It's like, well, I'm just kind of angry. Well, what about? Well, I don't know. I'm angry about, 59 things they list off. And the end result is it's all fear-based, right? And so as I learned in my own walk of failure and dealing with those things is to feel the fear and do it anyways. And that's exactly what you're saying. Feel that
Yep.
fear, but do it anyways, because the outcome and the purpose, the family involved, the mission that you've set in place, the things you're showing your family you want to do as a leader are things that are going to be rewarded in time. They just are, because you're going to continue to do it until that reward comes. And some people would look at that and say, well, that's stubborn tenacity. You need to grow up and recognize when you should stop doing something bad. And the answer is, well, you're not doing anything bad, so why stop? It just means that the good is going to be better when that time comes. Now, if you're out being an alcoholic and drinking and cheating on your wife, that's a whole different that's a whole
Right.
different thing you should stop doing. But that's not what
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
talking about. Right? That's not what we're talking about at all. And everybody wants to call out, well, you didn't say X, or because you said green and I like blue, then I hate you. And that's not actually the way this works. See, those are all emotional connectivity problems that people are just, straining in life out of fear. And we got to get past that. But you said it very well, and I can't say it really any better towards the end of this call. And that is that, tenacity and your purpose and your mission are your destiny, and you're going to go get it. And that is where big things come from. Because
And
you will
one
go.
other thing I wanted to say, I'm not a
Sure.
religious, I'm not associated with any major religion. I like to think that a lot of us, whether we pray or we visualize or we meditate, I like to think a lot of it is the same thing, right? And we call it different things and we all fight about it, which is crazy to me. But one of my favorite movies is the movie Rudy, right? Yeah, we've all probably all seen it. And he's talking to the priest in that movie and he says, I've done everything I can. I pray, I'm working out. How come this isn't working? And the priest says to Rudy, he says, we pray in our time, but God answers in his time. And I've never forgotten that, right? Because, and again, I don't say this to a lot of people, so I'll say it to your entire podcast because there's religious sort of connotations, right? But the
Sure.
message that I take about it, I think about it every day, is like, I've felt like that level of victimization where you're like, I've done everything. I've put every dime of this money into this company for all these years. Like, I've done everything. And like, I feel like a victim. I'm frustrated. Like I felt like when I was a little kid when you didn't get what you wanted. But I remind myself every day, the world responds in their time. God responds in their time. You do what you do, and then don't worry about it will work out. There's a lot of things I love about this country, but one thing I love about this country is if you don't quit. Now, I struggled all the way through school. I wasn't diagnosed with ADD. I have ADD. I wasn't diagnosed until I was in junior in college, and I struggled all the way through school. I mean, information wouldn't stick in my head. And one of the things that got me through was like sort of the 10,000 hour rule of being tenacious. I learned not to quit. I learned to outwork problems. And that got me so much further than a lot of people that were very smart, right? But at the end of the day, one thing I love about this country is that if you don't quit, you simply will not lose. Not one human being in this country that didn't quit lost. And everyone wants to read all these books about what's the secret message? What's the secret sauce? What's your secret sauce? Don't stop.
Tenacity and imperfect action.
Just don't
And then
stop.
something perfect will happen along the way.
Yep.
And people will come into your path that are helping you. And it'll be easier to see the people who are not sincerely and genuinely authentic and trying to help you, and they will move out of your way.
That's it.
And that is the truth of my experience. And it sounds like the truth of the path that you're on too, which I appreciate so much that you came on and shared in honesty and just telling your story and telling your truth. And I appreciate that very much, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, thank you, Neil. Like I said, Neil the moon, man, right?
To the moon.
Your group and our relationship was fascinating to me when it came into existence and when that grain of sand became visible. And so I'm really
I'm honored.
excited about the future and I'm optimistic. I'm always optimistic, but again, being relentless and having blind optimism. People have told me that I have blind optimism like it's my Achilles heel forever. And it's not an Achilles heel. It's a piece of gold and it's a silver bullet.
That's right. And it's the gold seam in your opportunity. And we're going to focus it and get down in the details. And you're going to see some great things I know happening in the next weeks and months to come. So thank you so much for spending some time with me today.
Yep. Thank you, Neil.
If you like this episode, please share it with people you think will enjoy it as well. Thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for a brand new episode of High Voltage Business Builders.